to this seminar. What did I hear? Okay. The director of the Mittal South Asia Institute is caught in the insurmountable Delhi traffic. So I'm Ashutosh Varshney, professor at Brown University, but I'm also a member of the steering committee of the Mittal Institute. So let me say a couple of words about the institute. The missions, I'm reading straight from the mission statement. The Lakshmi Mittal and Family South Asia Institute at Harvard, through interdisciplinary research, seeks to advance and deepen the understanding of critical issues relevant to South Asia and its relationship with the world. As part of this mission, the Mittal Institute hosts a multitude of seminars and conferences, not only at Harvard, but also in the region. And this is one such seminar webinar. It is a hybrid event, and the session is being recorded and will be is being also live streamed on the YouTube channel of the Mittal Institute. And the Q&A session after our panel discussion is completed will include questions coming via Zoom to us, as well as, of course, questions asked by the attendees in person. Let me now introduce what we want to discuss and why. In constructing this panel, I've been guided by two considerations. The larger democratic theory, which is in many ways the bedrock of my discipline, political science, and the specific political and constitutional history of India. So combining the theoretical with the specific and the empirical. The key question appears to be the following. Are the recent assembly elections yet another turning point for India's polity? The BJP won handsomely 4 of the 5 state elections, including most vitally Uttar Pradesh, which has become the foundation of BJP's political power. What do these elections and the BJP's massive victory signify? Now, at the most basic theoretical level, and I am now referring to democratic theory here, at the most basic theoretical level, the key issue is the following. India appears to be heading towards a deepening clash between electoral democracy, India's electoral democracy, and its constitutional democracy. What do I mean? Elections are a fundamental requirement of democracy, as we know. Robert Dahl, arguably the leading democracy theorist after the Second World War, proposed 2 minimal criteria for electoral democracy: contestation, 1, participation, 2. India's elections continue to satisfy both of these criteria. Participation rates are substantial and contestation is vigorous. WeDem Institute in Sweden described India since last year as an electoral autocracy. Viewed from this position that I just laid out for you, that is wrong. It's not an electoral autocracy, it remains an electoral democracy. But after the awful political experiences of Europe in the 1930s and 40s, and the US from 1880s through 1960s, both were democratic, but there were awful experiences, especially with regard to minorities. Democracy after the Second World War also is about minority rights, protecting minority rights, protecting minorities from racial, ethnic, or religious majoritarianism. For a democracy to be meaningful, the minority and majority communities must enjoy equality is the claim of democratic theory. In other words, there are two cardinal principles. No elections, no democracy is the first cardinal principle of democracy theory. And the second cardinal principle is no minority rights, no democracy. Now, this, of course, is not simply a theoretical matter. India's constitution followed these two principles in 1950. Apart from saying that only universal franchise elections can establish governments in India, in independent India, it also protected minority rights, guaranteeing minorities equality with the majority community. So these two principles the Constitution followed. The historical background of the founding moment of India's Constitution is very relevant here. And I get into the, as what I said, the specific constitutional political history of India. When Muhammad Ali Jinnah contended that Muslims would not be secure in a Hindu majority India, however democratic it became, Ambedkar said the argument was wrong. Minority rights and equality, religious equality, he argued, will be constitutionally guaranteed, forcing governments to act accordingly. The fact that India had a Hindu majority, argued Ambedkar emphatically, did not mean that its democracy would be majoritarian. These are two different concepts. These two, and you can add to minority rights, freedom of expression, if you will, you can make the argument a little more complicated, add that to the democratic charter, a fuller democratic charter, elections, minority rights, freedom of expression. But let's just stick to minority rights and elections for the sake of an easier argument, which we can make more complicated if necessary. So these two promises of democracy, popular wishes ascertained via the electoral mechanism, and minority protections provided via the constitutional mechanism, came in clear conflict after 2019, not after 2014. And we can go into the details of it if you so wish. When BJP in 2019 fought parliamentary elections on a Hindu nationalist electoral agenda. It did not fight on that agenda in 2014. After 2019, laws were quickly enacted via parliament in keeping with this electoral agenda. But the BJP also kept losing state elections after May 2019, and the onward march of a Hindu nationalist agenda ran into some difficulties. Has March 2022 electorally revitalized the Hindu nationalist legislative and ideological agenda? Should one now expect ideologically attuned laws and executive decrees, most significantly in Uttar Pradesh? These are questions we need to ask. Let's see how the panelists answer these questions. I will introduce the panelists as they appear here, as they speak. And I will also tell you what question I posed to them, which they'll be answering in their 10 minutes. And they, of course, if they wish to disagree with the formulation that I have presented of democratic theory, we'll have an interesting discussion on the formulation, the larger generic formulation as well. The order of speakers is there on the poster. Sanjay Kumar is speaking virtually to us from, I think, Chandigarh or somewhere in Punjab. And Sanjay Kumar is a professor at the Center for the Study of Developing Societies and co-director of Lokniti, which is which has been historically India's leading research program on elections, both parliamentary and state. Lokniti has done other things as well, but in political science, we recognize them as the leading institution analyzing elections in India since roughly 1993. There are other institutions which have entered that domain of late, but Lok Niti began in 1993, analyzing and collecting data. So Sanjay, if you can hear me, your 10 minutes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Posed to you was, how have different social categories, upper castes, OBCs, upper, lower, if you want to split them further, SCs, Jata, non-Jata, we want to split that too, that category too, and minorities voted. Should gender now be viewed as a clearly distinct social category to be added to the well-known categories of caste and religion as determinants of voting? Sanjay, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Ashutosh Varsne. Yes, these are the two questions which you have posed, and I would be happy to respond to these two questions. But let me go back a little bit and not ask a question, but pose a kind of a dilemma that whenever there is a big victory of BJP, whether it is in UP or in some other state, there is a big narrative which is built around this big victory, that this victory is not about caste politics, and BJP has managed to win or register a massive victory because of the developmental work which BJP has been able to do in the state. I strongly differ to this dominant view. This was the view propagated in many states earlier also. Even in Uttar Pradesh now, there is a dominant view that, look, this big victory of BJP is not because of caste combination. This is because of the developmental work done by BJP during last 5 years. But the evidences which we have collected through the surveys, I get a clear sense that if we look at the voting patterns, people or voters belonging to different caste communities have remained sharply polarized, either in favor of BJP Gathbandhan or in favor of Samajwadi Party Gathbandhan. I will come to the data later on in a minute's time. But why I say that even this BJP's victory is crafted because of the well-crafted coalition BJP and Samajwadi Party wanted to or tried to create. Look at the alliances BJP managed to form with several regional parties, and the same applies to Samajwadi Party also. And what was the main motto or main purpose behind building this social coalition or building these alliances? The BJP or Samajwadi Party managed to form alliances with different regional parties with the sole aim of consolidating vote support base or vote bank of different caste communities, especially with an eye on the lower OBC vote, because BJP was more or less confident of getting the upper caste vote, Samajwadi Party more or less confident of getting the Yadav vote and the Muslim vote. So the contestation was largely about the lower OBC vote, and that is why the whole coalition was built around by BJP and Samajwadi Party with different political parties, keeping in mind the lower OBC votes. Now let me cite some of the data and suggest why I see this election as a sharply polarized on caste lines. If I look at the vote percent, the vote share or how upper caste have voted for BJP, this is all. I don't want to cite data one by one. This has been published at several places, but just an overview of Brahmins, Rajput, Vaishyas, and other upper caste. Among the other upper caste, it is just below 80, which is 78% of other upper caste voted for BJP. But for all other upper caste, whether it is Brahmins, there was so much of talk about Brahmins being unhappy, but look at almost 90% of Brahmins voted for BJP and the allies. Rajputs 87%, Vaishyas 83%. The point to note is almost more than 80% of the upper caste voted for BJP in these elections. Normally, we would not see such a high polarization of a caste in favor of any political party in a assembly election. If it is a Lok Sabha election, yes, we find such polarization in favor of BJP. We have seen this happening in 2014 and 2019. But in the assembly election, the votes are more fragmented. But in this election in UP, we did not see fragmentation of vote as we have seen in 2017. For all these castes, the BJP's vote share in 2017 was much less. Now, if we look at the other side of caste polarization, Yadavs, we no guess. Everybody keeps thinking, or there are enough evidence to suggest Yadavs vote for Samajwadi Party in a big way. The past data have always suggested that Yadavs have voted for Samajwadi Party in a big way. But that big way, when I say a large number, that always revolve around 60%, 52, 58, 60, 65. But in this election, it was 83%. Very high polarization of Yadavs in favor of Samajwadi Party. Same applies with the Muslim vote in favor of Samajwadi Party. Uh, Samajwadi Party has always got sizable number of votes among the Muslims, but the range has been almost 50%, 48, 49, 50%. BSP always got roughly 20% of the Muslim vote, and same applied with Congress in UP. Roughly 15 to 20% of the Muslims have voted for Congress over last several elections. But this is an election where 80% of the Muslims have sided with Samajwadi Party. So these two extremes, on one side, the upper caste, more than 80%. And if we look at the two, the MY combination for Samajwadi Party, the Yadavs and the Muslims, 80% or little more than 80%. And now if we look at the lower OBC caste, about which there was so much of contestation, the lower OBC caste, and I can name this Kurmi, Koiri, Kevat, Kashyap, Mallar, other smaller OBC. Among these castes, roughly in the range of 65-66% have voted for BJP, and roughly in the range of 25 to 26-27% voted for Samajwadi Party. So the vote, the support base of lower OBC got split between BJP and Samajwadi Party, and BJP was the major beneficiary of the lower OBC vote. There was a lot of talk about how Jats are going to vote, but the Jat vote remained split. A large proportion of the Jat vote went in favor of BJP, a bigger proportion, 55% of Jats voted for BJP and the allies, and Samajwadi Party and its allies got only 34-35% of the Jat vote. So these evidence, to my mind, clearly indicate that there was a huge caste-based voting, especially and I put a lot of emphasis on this, that being an assembly election, if we such a high polarization of caste in favor of BJP or against BJP, I think this is a good evidence to suggest this was a caste-based voting. If I look at the Dalit vote, so Jatav vote, which used to go to BSP in a big way, roughly 85-87%. So there is a split in Jatav vote now, and sizable number of Jatav votes have also shifted in favor of BJP. 21%. Samajwadi Party is still not being able to attract the Dalit vote, whether it is Jatav or non-Jatav Dalits. And if we look at the support base of BJP among the non-Jatav Dalits, that's a massive shift of non-Jatav Dalits in favor of BJP, 41% and only 27% in favor of BSP. So BJP has made huge inroads among the Jatavs as well as the non-Jatavs Dalit. So I think these are enough evidences, in my opinion, to suggest how polarized was this election on caste lines. I'm not saying that each and every voter of these castes who voted for either BJP plus or Samajwadi Party voted only because of their caste affiliation. There may be several other considerations, but caste affiliation has been one of the important considerations, because why large number of people, voters belonging to or who have voted for BJP did not want to vote for Samajwadi Party. They're being allergic to the caste called Yadavs, that, oh, if Samajwadi Party comes to power, it will become a Yadav Raj. So if you go by those narratives, there is a clear indication that caste was one of the dominant consideration. While in the survey setting, they won't say that we have voted because we belong to a particular caste, but an underplaying of caste element was always there if we look at people who have voted for BJP and Samajwadi Party. And the second question is about the women vote. I think it's too early to, in my opinion, too early to think that women have emerged as a distinct voting bloc. But I think there are enough signals to suggest that women have become more active in politics, and their electoral participation has not only increased, but I think in the coming years, that's also going to increase. The point why I say that it's too early to see women as a distinct electoral voting bloc, because I think too much of emphasis has been paid on women voting in favor of BJP in a big way. There are different ways of looking at the data, and I don't see a very enthusiastic women vote in favor of BJP in UP or in other states. While yes, there was a reservation among large number of women voters for voting for Samajwadi Party. So look at the men and the women vote. Among women, 46% voted for BJP. Among men, 44%. So there is only 2% difference, 2% advantage of BJP among men and women. There is a different way of looking at this data. If we compare it with Samajwadi Party, then we will look at a different advantage. But preference for BJP among men and women in different states. If we look at Goa, among women, 33% voted for BJP, among men, 34% voted for BJP. Punjab, 8% for among women, 8% among men. No difference at all. UP, women, 46% voted for BJP, men, 44% voted for BJP. Uttarakhand, 46% women voted for BJP, men voted for BJP. So these figures indicate that they are inclined to vote for BJP in a big way. Yes, there are indication of some inclination towards BJP among women voters, but yes, the data clearly indicate that there was a reservation, strong reservation among women to vote for Samajwadi Party, because the difference in Samajwadi Party vote share among men and women is 6%. Among women, only 33% voted for Samajwadi Party. Among men, it was 39%. So that's a huge difference. And that, in my mind, is an indication of women's reservation towards voting for Samajwadi Party. So in my opinion, yes, there is a movement in favor of looking at women as a vote bank, but I think it's too early to think that women have emerged as a vote bank. I think I will stop here and maybe respond to the questions later on. Thank you, Ashutosh.
Thank you. Thank you. Sanjay, you took exactly 10 minutes. You're a model. Our next speaker is Yamini Iyer, the president of Center for Policy Research here in Delhi, and in my view, the leading analyst and thinker of accountability in India. The question I posed to her was as follows: how does one understand accountability now? The UP government spectacularly failed to provide jobs to the state's youth, and it was unable to protect citizens from COVID. Yet the incumbents, that is the BJP, returned with a 2/3 majority, which is huge in parliamentary systems. What lessons can analysts learn about how citizens evaluated government performance? Whichever you prefer.
It's fine by me. Thank you so much, Ashu, for that wonderful introduction and for bringing all of us together to think through these very thought-provoking questions that you have posed to us. And thanks to the Lakshmi Mittal Institute for organizing this event. It's a real privilege for all of us to be here, and especially to the audience for having given up on Syed Naqvi to listen to us instead. Makes you feel good. So I think I'm going to respond to the question you posed, Ashu, by thinking a little bit more about the emerging nature of the relationship that is emerging between citizens and state. It's still being shaped in the context of the BJP dominant political party system that we find ourselves in today. And before we examine the world we find ourselves in today, it's also important to remember that one of the big challenges democratic India has confronted historically over since our founding moment has been that we've been much better, at least until recently. As Neerja Jayal has shown in her powerful work on citizenship, the experience of full citizenship in the context of our political freedoms has been far richer and far more vibrant than our experience of citizenship in the realm of our socioeconomic rights. The fundamental puzzle of democracy as it unfolded in India has always been how is it that It created the space for a fuller expression of our political freedoms, but that never necessarily translated into a well-articulated push for fuller provision of our socioeconomic rights. And a lot of what happened in India in the 2000s was a response to that failure of our democracy that emerged not out of the formal state system or the formal political party system, but emerged through elite civil society mobilization and some grassroots civil society mobilization and the role of the courts that for all its limitations place the language of citizens' rights front and center in forging the relationship of citizens and the state, particularly in the realm of welfare. And that's important because for the vast majority of Indians, that's the mechanism through which Indian citizens engage the state, demand, claim their rights, and experience the extent to which the state is willing to fulfill its obligations towards citizens in the context of socioeconomic rights. I think with the emergence of the BJP becoming the dominant national party system, as Ashu rightly said, political freedoms are certainly under attack. But there's also been a careful reorientation of the articulation of the citizen-state relationship in the realm of welfare and in the realm of socioeconomic rights and claim making in a very interesting way. And I think it's important for us to remember these are narratives, but narratives in politics build political legitimacy, and they may or may not necessarily shape outcomes at the polling booth, but they shape the legitimacy of what a political party does and what citizens hold the political party accountable for. The narrative of welfare and what is increasingly being picked up by journalists who travel around in times of elections, the Labharti phenomenon, are an important and interesting evolution of the emerging dynamic of citizen-state relations that I think we need to engage with a lot more, understand and critique. If you look at the way the BJP spoke of welfare back in 2014 in the run-up to the elections and in the aftermath, empowerment versus entitlement was how the BJP presented its own imagination of citizen-state relations as distinct from what the Congress was doing. So the Congress's, or the UPA rather's, rights framing was seen very much in opposition in the framework of doors, handouts, left-wing populism. Arun Jaitley, before he presented the first budget after the BJP rode to power, the NDA rode to power in 2014, made an interesting statement that later, if you start looking at how fiscal deficit numbers look, gives you cause for pause and a few giggles, that we are not a government about populism. We are all about fiscal prudence. All this left-wing welfare, doles, that's all populism. We will only focus on fiscal prudence. But obviously the reality of politics in India is that welfare is central to shaping how politics and politicians engage with citizens. And so welfare never really disappeared. It was always there. But the challenge was building this new narrative. And if you look a lot at Prime Minister Modi's early speeches and early steps around the welfare state or reframing of the welfare state, a lot of the language was about how the poor don't need help, they need empowerment, they need to fight for themselves. In fact, in a recent interview that Amit Shah gave to the Indian Express before the elections, he spoke about this again. We are not about freebies and populism, we are about empowerment. So the framework of empowerment is extremely important. And as that framework of empowerment starts unfolding over the period of the first few years of the BJP in power, it sort of articulated itself in the form of schemes that were specifically about delivering individual benefits to individuals. It wasn't about creating active citizenship or rights-based claim making. It was about delivering services to citizens, because it is in that delivery that I am now empowering you to fend for yourself. So that framework is very visible, and I think it continues to shape the way in which the BJP is trying to build that relationship between citizens and states. And the individual matters here a lot. As the party system starts getting deeper integrated and the party and state start fusing over the course of time, we see the emergence of the Labharti phenomenon. And the emergence of the Labharti phenomenon is important because at one level, it's very much about these individual benefits that are being given through various schemes, but it's also about framing the citizen as the beneficiary. So again, it's not about delivering of schemes or improved governance. It's about the citizen as the beneficiary receiving individual benefits, and then the citizen having to be with these benefits fend for themselves. So it's interesting that you give the gas connection, you give 2 free rounds, and then it's up to the citizen to go and fill the gas. You build the toilet, and then you leave it for the citizen to maintain the toilet. And so on and so forth. And what's particularly crucial about this is that the Labharti is receiving what they are giving. So the BJP has, for a whole host of reasons that we can talk about in the Q&A, been perhaps, at least in narrative terms, because there is no hard evidence, been better at delivering these individual benefits. And in that sense, the BJP has very well effectively fulfilled its commitment to the voter. And it has, and what we also need to understand that in the process of doing so, it has also shifted the way in which the voter and the political party interact with each other. Here, the Modi phenomenon and the use of technology have played a very, very central role. And again, the party's role in this is to build that constant connection between the Labharti and the political party or the political leadership that is providing these benefits. And in this, and because technology allows for this direct delivery, it also means that the intermediaries, the chief minister, the MLAs are less relevant to the process of making and shaping the relationship between the party worker, between the political leadership and the individual. So the good old days of James Manners, towel under the carpet fixer, is no longer playing the same role. He's not bringing citizens to the state. He's merely reminding citizens that the leadership has delivered a certain set of goods for you. So it's a fundamental shift in the nature of that relationship. And in those constant reminders, the cult of political leadership is built. And that cult of the political leadership, I think, also is beginning to create a new kind of Nilanjan Sircar's framing of politics as Vishwas is, I find, a very useful way of articulating this. But it helps to build that framework of trust. And that relationship between the political leadership and citizens. So the famous phrase that went around in the run-up to the elections, "Modi ka namak khaya hai to usse vote denge," or a version of that, very much encapsulates precisely that nature of that relationship. And the other important thing of what it does is that it also ensures that even when things are not delivered, the sense of trust that it will be delivered stays very central in the relationship of the voter. So for the little bit of time that I joined Bhanu, who's here, and Nilanjan and others in the field in Eastern UP, even when we met Labhartis, so-called, whose ration card had been cancelled, or who were complaining about Chinese chawal and what pani in namak, there was still a belief that things will come. And the other really interesting word that was consistently used, particularly by women that we spoke to, was that Modi kept us surakshit, hame surakshit rakha. And when men talked about suraksha, they talked about law and order. When women talk about surakshit, I'm interpreting here, but I think they mean something different. It kept me secure in a very, very unstable time. So there are lots of things that are wrong. Jobs, mehengai. It's not that the voter doesn't recognize that, but the voter also has a strong connect with a strong leader who has kept us surakshit, safe, in times of crisis. And there the role of ration plays a very important role, simply because when food was hard to put on the table, the ration ensured that the food was put on the table. And many reminders were given that this ration came from the top political leadership with intermediaries that were cut out. Here again, the groundwork was laid by the National Food Security Act, which expanded the public distribution system and built in a whole set of reforms that the UP government then implemented. And it's important to remember that for all the talk about empowerment versus entitlement, and there was a lot of discussion about dismantling the public distribution system, which in many ways encapsulated the debate that we were having about the BJP's welfare versus welfare of the past. BJP states did not participate in the experiments to give cash in place of PDS. It was limited to union territories, as friends in the Right to Food movement were just telling me as I spoke with them this afternoon. But also, importantly, the BJP has actually consistently been the poster child of PDS reform. Don't forget Chhattisgarh under Raman Singh, which eventually became the template for the National Food Security Act. So this relationship between welfare and the citizen has always been central to the BJP's politics. It has been reshaped and rearticulated in contemporary times using this combination of Labharti. So it's about the individual citizen receiving benefits with direct personal connection with the political leader. And it creates an imagination of citizenship, which is less of rights claiming in the democratic space and far more of personalized receiving of benefits from the state. So in some ways, it's reinforcing the old days of Mai Baap Sarkar, but perhaps in a more efficient delivery way. The consequences of this for democratic participation and the larger goal of active citizenship is something we need further engagement and investigation on.
Thank you. Just one comment as a moderator. So the import of your argument is that this new definition of welfare, which was about individual and direct delivery of benefits, seen as empowerment in difficult times, especially last several years, clearly overpowered any consideration that citizens might have had about employment loss or not enough creation of jobs or the misery inflicted by COVID.
Absolutely. The citizen has
That's the idea.
Yeah, the citizen has been cast as a Labharti, the beneficiary, and the state ensured that the Labharti was kept secure in times of crisis. So in that sense, the citizen was holding the state accountable for the compact that the state had forged with them over the years.
Thank you. Our third speaker is, yeah, I think, no, let's go with the,
I have a presentation.
you have presentation. Let's go with Gilles. A third presenter is Gilles Vernier. And the question posed to him is Uttar Pradesh the new Gujarat? By the 2000s, Hindu nationalism had institutionalized itself as the political common sense of Gujarat. Is a similar process underway in UP, or maybe it has already institutionalized itself? What kinds of legislation, furthermore, and government policies should be expected after BJP's massive return to power in India's largest state? Jim.
Thank you, Ashutosh, and thank you very much to the Lakshmi Mittal Institute for organizing this event. Given that this is a question that requires, careful consideration, and usually I would speak extempore, but for once I allow myself to use, some notes.
Good.
Because there are different ways of answering that question. One possible direction, of course, is to look at how the BJP built support and maintain it over time in UP through what kind of electoral strategies and forms of mobilization, a mix of caste equations, religious polarization, the tropes of development and welfare, all organized around the benevolence or the projection of the benevolence of strong leaders. And so one can find similarities between the way the BJP runs its campaign, across states, and without doubt, for future elections, other state units from the BJP and other parties as well, state leaders, are going to look and dissect the UP campaign and see what they can learn from it and what they can emulate from it. In many ways, the message that this election provides in a nutshell is that you can compensate for economic distress by mixing these elements together, right? The right kind of caste appeal, the right kind of insistence on welfare, tying welfare to the personality of leadership, as Yamini just explained, in the context of religious polarization, right? Putting all these elements together into a mix is basically what helps you build the kind of broad appeal that you need in order to win an election. But there's another possible direction to answer that question, which is to look at UP and Gujarat as models of governance. When we ask if UP is the new Gujarat, we are actually also talking about models of governance, models of dealing with citizenship, models of projecting a certain kind of political leadership, mode of projecting a certain idea of inclusion, which involves seeking to unify Hindus across caste, but by also excluding religious minorities from having a say in the public sphere. And so when we list the features of these models, which actually go to the heart of your argument on the divorce between constitutional and electoral democracy, we need to make a distinction between features that are present in state politics at large in India, that are from the features that are specific to the UP government or to the Gujarat government for that matter. And some of these features, I would argue, the personalization of politics, the personalization of welfare, the concentration of powers, the marginalization of state assemblies, the use of state machinery for political goals are actually common features of state politics in India. Most chief ministers across India concentrate powers. They retain a large number of portfolios, including in half of the case, the crucial home portfolio. Most of them seize every opportunity to plaster their face everywhere, including on the distribution of public goods. Most regional parties do not cultivate new leadership. Governments are headed by party bosses who do not have much appetite for power sharing in either of those places, party or government. Populism enacted by redistribution is actually quite common. Tamil Nadu under Jayalalitha is, of course, a prime example. Even in Delhi, I would contend Mr. Kejriwal is no exception. Personalized attribution of welfare is also a part of the Delhi model of governance. All these promote populist form of governance that present the state's action not as a result of a duty that it owes to citizens, but as the product of an individual's generosity. And it creates that, and that furthers a point that Yamini was making, a system of obligation in which voters are invited to reciprocate that generosity by giving their vote back to the source of that state generosity. Milan Vaishnav recently wrote a short essay in Hindustan Times in which he argues, like others have done before, that much of India's democratic decline is actually located in state politics and rooted in state politics and not solely at the national level. And in that sense, Yogi Adityanath's government or Hemant Biswa Sharma government in Assam or the Karnataka government under Basavaraj Bommai or Yediyurappa before him are not entirely different from one another. They may exacerbate some of these traits, as BJP leaders usually do. They do it with more drive, with more systematicity. There's also a higher degree of professionalism and it's all tech enhanced. But they do not propose models of centralized politics that are fundamentally different than most of their colleagues. And obviously, Patrick is looking at me. Kerala, of course, is an exception in that regard. So the specificity of that UP model or that Gujarat model lies elsewhere. It's located in ideology. It's located in the political project that animates these political leaders. What model of society, what model of politics, what vision of India, what vision of Indian citizenship, is being promoted. What makes the Gujarat, or what made the Gujarat model specific was the articulation of an encompassing Hindu identity with a pre-existing strong regional identity. Being Hindu and being Gujarati became synonymous, and minorities in that context became an unavoidable other whose presence had to be tolerated, but at the same time kept at bay from any kind of power-sharing arrangement. UP does not have that articulation between strong regional identity and Hindutva because there's no strong particular regional identity to UP, and colleagues from Brown have extensively written and argued about this. But an encompassing Hindu identity is being built through, of course, religious polarization, but also an ecumenical discourse on caste inclusion, which repose actually on the micro-targeting of caste as part of an elaborate electoral strategy. In UP, so Hindutva gets articulated around other things. The figure of the chief minister was himself a religious leader, state policies that support, Hindu sites and projected norms, law and order legislation that can be used to disproportionately target specific kind of opponents or dissenters, and that approach to caste that includes all, as long as you do not belong to, Yadav, Jatav, or Muslims. But then there's another crucial way in which I think UP and Gujarat differ, is that the Gujarat model is not just a particular way of doing politics or projecting leadership, but it's also an economic model. From the 2000 onwards, the centralization of political power has been accompanied by unprecedented levels of economic concentration. We've all seen the recent chart of the growth wealth of Mr. Adani. It's a spectacular illustration of that, but obviously these are processes that have started long ago, coinciding when Mr. Modi took over as chief minister in Gujarat. And in UP, you don't find the same ties, of course, between politics and the economy, because for a variety of reasons, UP has not become Gujarat over the past 5 years in terms of economic development. One could, however, point at specific subregions where, Western UP, for example, the way there has been public investment in infrastructure development, investment to improve the connectivity of Western UP with the NCR region, which are reminiscent of some of the state intervention to transform this infrastructure of the economy. So there is something happening, but at the scale yet of a sub-region, and the rest of the state, which remains essentially agrarian once you drive past Aligarh, remains essentially agrarian and still has a long way to go before creating those kind of context. So I have written recently that the UP elections show that a party can use a mix of welfare politics, strongman's politics, caste arithmetic, the exclusion of minorities, and succeed electorally despite high economic distress. Since we can foresee that this economic distress is going to last for a foreseeable future, at least until the 2024 election, my sense is that a lot of electoral analysts and political leaders are going to seek inspiration from the way the BJP succeeded in winning a consecutive term in UP, despite all the challenges that you reminded us of in your introduction. And since the chief ministers in particular cannot fix the economy, they may seek to attenuate economic distress by providing subsistence level support, which in turn can be used as instruments of their own personal publicity, or in this case, publicity for the prime minister himself. And finally, there's another way in which the two models differ, is that in Gujarat under Modi, the model was built in a relation of antagonism against Delhi, including within the BJP, right? The defense of Gujarati interest was also a defense of the state of Gujarat against the center. But in UP, the PM's presence looms very large in the state politics. In fact, for all the talks about the differences and divergence and between the PM and the CM, there's a very effective, seamless division of labor between center and state, between PM and CM. The CM is a figure of a mahant, of a strong man, a religious and a caste leader who's strong, delivers on law and order, but the welfare is essentially attributed to the prime minister through schemes like the Pradhan Mantri Anna Yojana, the free ration scheme, which has actually just been extended for 3 months. So in other words, these models are hard to compare because the states in which they are located are so different. The expansion or the revival of BJP in states like UP, Assam, or Karnataka has followed actually fairly different trajectories, and further expansion, further revival will necessitate tweaks in those models. But again, there are important underlying similarities. All of these are animated by the same political vision, the same project of building a majoritarian state. All of them work in concert with the Prime Minister. They do not seek to create regional alternatives to the Prime Minister. But the methods and the objects of mobilization will vary. I will end on this. In Assam, it's the reframing of the question of citizenship and belonging along religious lines, the creation of that category of dubious citizens. In Karnataka, it's access to education, the depiction of Muslim communities as conservative, as exerting undue control on young women that somehow the government and the judiciary will rescue by prohibiting access to schools. It's also, the control of the public space with the eviction of Muslim vendors, street vendors in some localities. In UP, it's really been the instrumentalization of the state and the use of legislation to minimize minorities' participation in the public space. Minorities have a right to exist, including as Labarti, interestingly and importantly. They may also be beneficiaries of state generosity, but they may not participate in the public sphere in any significant political way. Hence the refusal of the BJP to nominate a single Muslim candidate in elections. So in short, I don't know whether UP is a new Gujarat model. I think as the BJP expands, as it revives and becomes a dominant force across states, it produces different models. And we have to look at what makes these models specific and ground our analysis in regional specificities rather than, seek one-fit-all explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I should have added that he is an assistant professor. Jill is an assistant professor at political science at Ashoka and has been co-director of the Triveni Data Center, which has been a source of enormous statistical help to a lot of us. They produced data sets as public goods, which can be used by the entire scholarly community, and with considerable gratitude from all of us. The last speaker is Rahul Verma, who is a fellow at the Center for at CPR, Center for Policy Research, a political scientist by training, PhD from Berkeley. And the question I posed to him was as follows. What are the options before the opposition parties till the parliamentary elections of 2024? Which options are more likely to be embraced? Is the Congress party in a position at all to challenge the BJP? Or will it be inexorably pushed towards a more serious coalitional strategy than it has pursued thus far? Rahul.
Thank you.
Rahul has a PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, Lakshmi Mittal Institute, for inviting me. It's an honor and privilege to be part of this panel. I was trained at Lokniti before going for my PhD. So Sanjay ji is here. Now I'm based at CPR. My fearless leader Yamini is here. My friend and colleague Jill, who provides data as fast as Election Commission publishes it. So the public would, we all need to do all the analysis. And Professor Varshney or Ashu is original Guruji, as my PhD advisor Pradeep also calls him Guruji. So thank you for having me. These are the two questions Professor Varshney asked me to answer. There is a political consultant way of answering this question. So just to give you an example, in Goa, IPAC mobilized 300 volunteers. And if you think that on each of those volunteers, salary plus housing plus car, they were spending 1 lakh a month for 6 months of work, and we all know the result in Goa, they must have spent 18 crores of rupees. Tiny state of Goa. So if you want something to happen in the entire country, think of how many hundreds of crores of rupees needed just to make a political challenge. Forget whether the elections will be overturned or not. Now, there is a political scientist way of answering these two questions, and I have a short answer. The answer to the first question is actually not much. An answer to the second question is no. But of course, I'm not here to give short answers, so I will take a long winding tour as all social scientists do
10
to
minutes.
explain
10 minutes.
in less than 10 minutes. The question is, are we actually living in a dominant party system? Professor Varshney in his opening remarks basically said the BJP's dominant system was running into some sort of troubles. We are in a dominant party system. Whether BJP won 2022 or not, or they were losing in elections, state assembly elections, they were having troubles, but we are living in a dominant party system for sure. So think of it. Yes, in Haryana, they came to power in alliance, but think of where BJP was in Haryana before 2014. It was not a single digit party. It's running second consecutive government. Maharashtra, they were not able to form government, but they were number 4 and they are now single largest party in the state. So basically what BJP has managed to change post 2014 is the political equilibrium in most states of this country. Even in Bengal, which they lost, they were not able to match their expectation, but they are the second pole in that state. They used to get 2 or 3% of votes before that in 2014. So make no mistake, we are in a dominant party system. Dominant party systems are built around 5 elements. The first element is ideological consensus. You can call it hegemony or dominance. It doesn't mean everyone has to agree. Ideological consensus largely means that even the opposition will start mirroring in strategies and tactics of the dominant party, right? So it's not coincidental that Aam Aadmi Party decides to basically focus on nationalism and build 76 polls in Delhi, which will have national flags. So basically mirroring of tactics will happen. Second, there will be electoral ascendancy, not saying that they will win all elections, but as I pointed out, in all the states, they will basically change the equilibrium. Third is basically this dominance will be sustained by an organizational machine of a phenomenal level, both at the online and offline world. So on the ground, we have all heard about Panna Pramukhs and cell-phone Pramukhs. I don't need to talk about that. Just to give you one data point from recently released book by Bhupendra Yadav and Ila Patnaik. At the beginning of 2019 campaign, BJP was making 0.5 million attempted calls per day, which was increased to 3.5 million attempted calls per day at the peak of the campaign. That is what just Bhupendra Yadav is telling, right? So think of the machine that is working behind, because it helps, as Yamini was saying, push any kind of narrative that BJP wants. It will make
0.5 million calls.
million attempted calls per day.
But when?
Per day at the beginning of the campaign.
And by the time the campaign matures, it's 3.5
million. And it's presided, the whole machine is presided by a charismatic leader at the top, and opposition will remain disarrayed during dominant party system. So we keep hearing this thing, why is opposition not coming together? It's not a bug of the system, it's the feature of the system. Remember the Congress dominant system of 1952-67? There was no grand coalition. The first time a grand coalition of parties came and succeeded was 1997, when there was a big crisis, right? So coming together of opposition is very, very difficult in a dominant party system. And what it does, the dominant party system, it basically allows, and as Yamini was mentioning, basically a fusion of party and state. And that apparatus basically sets the agenda and narratives. And what happens in elections, that voters choose parties and then they choose issues. So they rationalize choice of parties, and then they basically will tell you which issue matter for them, right? So it's basically, we are living in a very, very different ball game. Now, the reason why I said not much and no, because there is not one single opposition we are thinking about, right? And so there are many shades of the opposition, and strategies would be largely context dependent. So you have one opposition, which is a large opposition, which is government, which is Congress party. Then there is a second opposition, which is represented by parties like Aam Aadmi Party and TMC, which is now nationally ambitious, showing raw ambitions. In fact, they are going to cannibalize Congress in their rise to power. So there is a competition between these parties for the second spot. And then there is a third kind of opposition. Parties like BJD, parties like TRS, they are basically contained opposition in some ways. So they will fight BJP tooth and nail in their home state. But if their home state is not being challenged, they will have a happy-go-easy relationship with the BJP in Rajya Sabha voting patterns and in different ways, right? So we are seeing a very different kind of opposition. But this is basically a story of electoral opposition. We will also see a different kind of opposition we have seen in last 5-7 years, a civil society opposition. So in dominant party system, what will happen, and because all the crisis we mentioned about on the economic front and identity related questions, as Zeel mentioned, and this is my hunch, given what has been happening and going forward, especially even the recent data where BJP won shows that young and unemployed are dissatisfied. It's the first time that BJP did not have a big lead among young voters, even in UP, right? And so there is a dissatisfaction. If BJP does not manage to provide jobs and employment and other things, which is very, very hard, what you would see that basically, and parliamentary opposition fails to contain these anxieties, you will see a spillover of these anxieties on the street. So civil society protest will continue if parliamentary opposition fails to accommodate these things. Now, can the BJP dominance be challenged? Yes, there are two ways of challenging dominance. One is sudden challenge, which happens only in moment of crisis, and there is a big mobilization on that thing. And slow dominance gets challenged. The Congress system was challenged, but 30-40 years later, there are inbuilt contradictions, and those inbuilt contradictions will start producing diminishing returns at some point. Now it's up to the opposition. Do they want a sudden or a slow challenge to the BJP? There was a crisis. COVID was present. That opened the political furnace for a moment. But if the government was absent, in some ways, the opposition was super absent. And this is not just because I feel it. There is survey data suggesting that opposition was largely absent. And what Sanjay ji said about the voting pattern data, there is a lot of interesting insights. And Yamini also mentioned, there is a big crisis for the credibility of Mandal parties. What BJP managed to do is make law and order an issue of mobilization. Think about this. Yes, BJP led only 2 or 3 points among women voters, but the disadvantage which Samajwadi Party faced or the RJD faced basically gave a more than double-digit advantage to BJP. And if you translate that, the entire difference, so women in fact turned out more. If you translate that number, more than half of the difference between SP and BJP is basically produced by just women voters. And so just by virtue of how women are voting, and if this is a pattern, because we saw this in Bihar 2020, you can say, oh, that was Nitish Kumar. We saw that in Assam 2021. We saw all 4 states this time, and the closing of gender gap in 2019. So now, yes, it's early to say that gender has become an axis, but the signals are strong, and political scientists has to predict on what the signals are coming, right? And signals are very, very strong on that front. What happened in UP? For 2 minutes, I will finish that. So what happened in UP is basically something which we all made a mistake, is that we were thinking BJP's vote share was we were thinking of BJP's vote share at 2017, which was 37%. We forgot that in 2019, despite SP-BSP coalition, BJP managed to cross 51%. So this data point, basically what I did is bifurcated for first, second, third, fourth, fifth, seventh page. And if you look at what is happening in 2022, BJP's vote share is largely between 2019 and 2017, right? So it's the social coalition that BJP managed to create between 2014 and 2019 is so large in some parts of the country that it cannot be defeated by ordinary politics. It would need extraordinary political imagination. Yeah. This social coalition is a large Hindu coalition glued by politics of ethno-political majoritarianism, mobilized by a charismatic leader on the top and unprecedented machinery on the ground, right? And so, of course, BJP will face challenges as it has faced in Bengal. But what is happening? All states with significant Muslim population and BJP present will see a process of consolidation and counter-consolidation. You saw it in Assam, you saw it in Bihar, you saw it in Bengal, you saw it in UP. So BJP will have the same advantage, or SP will face the same disadvantage, which TMC will have in Bengal. So for BJP, it will be difficult to breach Bengal. just because of the demographic weight, as it will be difficult for SP or RJD to breach UP and Bihar in the short run. And just final points, Ashu, and these are two new data basically from the work I'm doing with Asim on Congress. Congress decline is structural and long. The first graph is basically plotting the number of electors India had in each election and Congress party's vote share in absolute numbers. In 1989, 84, 89, Congress vote share was around 120 million voters. That time, Indian electors was just 500. Today, Indian electors are 900. Congress vote share in absolute number is still at 120 million. So what Congress is facing is a challenge of mobilization. Turnout is increasing. Congress vote share since 1977 is actually stagnant and going down. So the road to 2024, final slide, Ashu, politics is always dynamic. I'm open to surprises, but basically options are open. Competition is largely closed. BJP is largely going to remain nationally buoyant, but in states it will face challenges. Next year, Karnataka, Chhattisgarh, and Rajasthan is going to come. In many of these states, Congress will do well, and everyone will again get excited before 2024. But the perceived competition for the second spot will basically lower the possibility of any grand coalition. And this is not just basically mobilization of votes. We forget that in politics, you need resources. And by resources, I mean this. If you don't control states, you don't have money to basically contest. And why will basically it will be hard? Because what you're missing is an anchor party or a consensus builder. You had a JP in 77, you had a VP Singh in 1989, you had Harkishan Singh Surjit in 1996. Who's the consensus builder at this moment? And if you want to see any sort of hint at what kind of opposition coordination can take place, will be July this year when presidential elections will take place. And I'm doubtful of large oppositional coalition coordination on that front.
Thank you, Rahul. Let's open up and widen the discourse. So before we go to the questions which might have arrived on Zoom, you'll pick two or three. Are there questions here from the in-person audience? Please raise your hand, introduce yourself briefly, and ask your question. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you. I have two brief questions. One, I don't know who will be the speaker. So do you think that the people these days are voting, are more inclined to elect their government rather than to elect their representative, which is usually the case? And if yes, how do you think which way these trends will take us? The second question, directed to the Rahul, as you pointed out, one of the survey during the COVID period, government was upset, but the opposition was more upset. In a situation when a pandemic suggests people needs 2 gauge distance, 2 gauge distance, and the resources are with the governments, how do you think that opposition had a greater chance to mobilize the people in that pandemic? Thank you.
You mean during COVID, you're saying it would have been extremely much more difficult for the opposition to organize than the government to
because government has the resources, and also this pandemic suggests that people need a distance. I mean, to spread the distance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who will take I think some of you have already written about, I don't remember who, about whether governments are elected or individual representatives are elected today.
Should we collect more questions and then answer?
No, you answer this way. Yeah.
Okay. So short answers to both of them. Yes, it was hard for opposition, but road to power is always hard.
Okay.
Yes, what did the opposition do in 1977 when they were being jailed? What did the opposition do in
1977 after they were jailed?
Yeah. So what could they have done? They could have been on the streets with people when they were walking. They could have sat there. You have to basically be seen present. Right? And so it's not a matter of what could have the opposition done. And in the surveys, basically voters in the survey are saying, among politicians who did help you, they were pointing to BJP workers. So they should have been pointing to only 6% of voters in urban India pointed to Congress and 30% pointed to BJP. And this is largely a game of perception. You have to win that perception back. You can't be doing politics on Twitter and then think that you are going to win elections.
Even on Twitter, BJP wins.
Yeah, but I would still like, and on the candidate and government.
Yeah, candidate versus government. Yeah, would you want?
Add
Just
to something.
just
No.
to add to this point, Ashish, you will remember even when we were in Eastern UP, that a lot of what we heard, it was a very dangerous time. Nobody in the places we visited necessarily had COVID or died of COVID, but the sense that things were unpredictable, it was dangerous, and the government, and particularly Prime Minister Modi, kept us secure and did whatever he could, which was to put bare minimum food on the table, was very embedded in the mind of many people that we spoke with. There was no counter narrative. And in fact, that counter narrative stayed limited to what many in this room were writing about in op-ed pages in English. It is for the politician to have built a counter narrative of what could have been done in a moment of crisis.
Sheil, do you want to respond to government versus representative? Who's elected?
So, yeah, it seems indeed that, party appeal versus candidate appeal, increases considerably. And as was been, described, previously in the by my co-panelist is, the slow marginalization of candidates and MLAs, from within that party machinery itself. If you look at, the professionalization of parties, and of course, BJP is a prime example, but there are other parties that have also professionalized their electoral operations. All of them have in common a centralization of operation and the building of these direct ties between leaders and voters. And the traditional role of mediation, which is not just the dirty patronage politics and brokerage, it goes beyond that. It was basically the heart of the job of the elected representative that is being sidelined. And therefore, we see, more and more, we see them becoming more and more marginalized, marginal figures. That and the fact that political parties themselves have over the years organized a very deep turnover of their own party members, of their own candidates, for a variety of reasons, which basically ensure that very few politicians actually get to do long political careers.
So the hugely proliferating literature on clientelism and brokerage in the political science will go down as a result of India, because intermediaries are being sucked out of the system.
It's a very
Okay, we will see that. Yes, Miss. Yeah. And let's see how many hands now. Let's collect maybe 3 questions. Miss, you go first. I saw your hand. Did I see a hand there? Yeah, those 2 first.
Okay, so my question is twofold.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
So my question is twofold and it goes to Professor Varshney's
Yeah.
articulation of the model. So as I understand, and I think Thomas Plum Hanson argues this in his recent book, The Law of Force and Ended Politics, is that a lot of what is happening right now is built on past legislations that have already been integrated into the Indian state. So say for example, the UAPA, right? A lot of that was already integrated from the Congress machinery. So I mean, you say that this came in clear conflict in 2019 and not in 2014. What I want to understand is if there was, say, a history of Indian democratic decline built into the constitutional system, so then what exactly is so different about this time period? I mean, my hunch is that it's the public participation in the violence that takes place, or the public articulation of what kind of violence they would perceive as part of imposition of law and order. Okay. What the public would understand as imposition of law and order is what's different in this period, instead of there being some conflict between electoral and constitutional decline.
Because from what I understand, those two always seemed as being historically antagonistic to each other in terms of the legislations that have been passed before, even by governments that aren't, say, the BJP. And so, which brings me to my second question. And I want to understand whether this has an impact on, say, a public articulation of the rule of law as well. So since democratic institutions, especially people's belief in criminal justice systems is at an all-time low, which is why a lot of strong men eventually come to power, right? Like Yogi Adityanath getting elected again and again is a strong testament to the fact that people don't believe in institutionalization of justice, but instead want public justice to take forefront. Then what would you consider be like, say, a public an alternate articulation of the rule of law? So those were my two questions.
Okay,
So-
yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Saurabh from CSLG JNU. I'm a PhD candidate there
At JNU.
at JNU. Yeah, I have a very small question. If you look at the UP data, I mean, there are several seats where the margin of votes is less than 2,000 votes. So in that, in the light of this, that there are more than 100 seats which have that kind of a margin, is it not? No. All right, then I drop my question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see, 1, 2, yeah, let's go to you. Yeah, this side, yes.
Thank you. So my question is actually to Sanjay sir, but I want to open it to the entire house. Your question to Sanjay sir was that do you see gender as one of the electorate as a separate? And he said no.
He said it's too early.
Yeah, it's too early. But this entire idea of saying that gender, it's too early to consider gender as a separate electorate may be based on the fact that we are considering the sociological aspect of gender being very in an opposite position to the family, or it's like females versus the males. But instead, like what Yamini ma'am pointed out, that females consider that the government has helped them and making them secure. It's more in the terms of family feeling secure. So don't you think we can consider gender as an electorate in the broad concept, where they do influence the entire family's decision to vote for a certain party on the basis of whether the family's fulfillment is what matters to them, as against their individual things?
Okay. Yes, let's go to you. Yeah. You switch it on and make it red. Yeah.
My name is Orko Prabhu. My question is to Yamini ma'am, and this is an overall full agreement on what you said, because as a journalist, I've also been carrying on stories and about the security matter. But on the delivery aspect, when we talk about, say, UP, right? So especially within various fields of public policy, we have seen there are issues in regards to last mile delivery when we talk about services being accessible, right? For example, Center for Science and Environment within sanitation has been having problems making inroads, providing those last mile delivery systems. So in that sense, doesn't it in a way conflict with the entire idea of what you proposed of delivery being made to individuals from the government side? And if it's not in conflict, then I would like to understand why per se. That's all. Yeah, thank you.
So let's handle this new set of questions before we get to the next round. Let's be brief in our reply. How about gender? Since you
Just sort of just to add what you say, right?
In the interest of time, she has already dropped the question.
No.
So yeah.
53 seats with 5,000 margin, BJP 130 and SP plus 120 seats. So that WhatsApp circulation is wrong. The second one on the gender. So I don't understand that. I think what everyone here was trying to say, gender as an electoral category or a political category. It is a distinct category, but the voting preferences among women have started showing distinct signs, but it's still not large enough as we can call about other, not large and stable enough in last 2-3 years that we can say that this is a distinct electoral category and will always vote in a very, very different way as we can say about other identities. It may emerge. I think the signals are strong, and that's why I said that this is a strong signal, but those signals can be noise 2 years later.
Yeah, so the methodological point here is that in order for you to call a category a separate category electorally, you have to use this word, has to be large and stable. So we need some more data points, simply. It's just a statistical matter. Some more data points will establish whether that's true or not. So,
I've heard it.
Sanjay, did you want to say?
No,
Are you-
I just wanted,
Yeah.
no, I just wanted to add on these, the 2 points which Rahul mentioned. One about, the victory margins. Just to cite another data, less than 1,000 margin, BJP won 9 seats, and less than 1,000 margin, Samajwadi Party won 6 seats. So what Rahul mentioned is it evens out. There is a lot of gossip being circulated on the what's all rubbish. We need to just look at this data. Second about this women vote. I think we are making a distinction between electorate. Women has emerged as an electorate category, as a significant electorate, but women has not emerged as a category as vote bank. And Rahul has already explained why I say they have emerged as a category electorate, because the turnout is increasing and political parties have now realized that, and they are making all effort to mobilize these women voters in their favor. So in terms of electorate, yes, they have emerged not as a vote bank, because we don't see significant shift of women vote in favor of one political party. And Rahul is, in a sense, I would endorse Rahul's view that we need this data to be stabilized. Once we see this stabilization take place, then we will say, yes, it has emerged as a vote bank or not emerged as a vote bank. Thank you.
Yamini, about the delivery, the question that came from here?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think I made that important qualification. We don't have any data. In fact, that's the stunning reality is that we don't have any good government or research, independent research that is telling us in any clear terms what is the actual outcome of a lot of what is being claimed on the ground. But what's important here, because we're talking about political narrative building, not about the outcomes of the welfare articulation, is that fusing of party state and the very careful relationship building between Modi, the leader, and the welfare benefit given to the Labharti, is that even when the benefit may or may not have reached to satisfaction. So we certainly heard a lot of people talking about the namak mein pani and Chinese chawal, plastic chawal, as much as we heard people talking about, the ration being delivered on time, the quality being better post-lockdown, etc. But there is a very strong sense that अगर आज नहीं मिलेगा तो कल जरूर मिलेगा, because there is a deep emotive connect and a sense that leadership will keep us secure. And I think that is what builds this narrative around. And what was one very important distinction between what is happening with NREGA, which is also critical to the overall social protection program that was built out after COVID, is that is not being picked up as much in the story of what the government has done, because the delivery of NREGA isn't about a direct thing that is happening between an individual and its leadership. The delivery of NREGA involves the panchayat, it involves the block officer, there's a multiple set of intermediaries. It's not an individual relationship, it's a work site. The relationship is built around that work site, and eventually individual money comes into your bank account. So notice that even though there's large unmet demand in government data on NREGA right now, which is actually bad data, it's more likely than not that the actual unmet demand is far higher than what we are picking up from the NREGA MIS. You're still not seeing a significant expansion of NREGA before elections and after elections. But immediately the first thing that the UP government did was to expand the free ration scheme, and doorstep delivery is being provided in Punjab. So I think that distinction is very important to understand the nature of citizen state dynamics that are being forged through welfare today.
And the question about Thomas Byrne Henson, he's over concluding, is wrong. Here's why. There is a fundamental departure that has come about after 2014, especially after 2019. The point about UAPA is right, but there's also something called abolition of Kashmir's special status. There's also something called Citizenship Amendment Act. These are not previous legislation. In fact, the BJP and Mr. Modi in particular would be seriously offended by your comment that there is no marked legislative and policy departure under the current regime. They would not like to do what Congress has done. UAPA is a continuation of some sort, but there's not only Kashmir and Citizenship Amendment Act, the idea of nationalism, the hijab idea. Do you think Congress party would have told the young women of Karnataka, you cannot enter, cannot cover your head in school? They might have said something about full length burqa, maybe. But hijab is a different story. Always is covering your head. If they can't cover their head, why should the Sikhs cover their head with a turban? These questions would have emerged, but they have not emerged in this discourse. So I think Thomas is wrong, flat wrong about this. Okay, on the criminal justice system and vigilantism. Criminal justice system may be slow, etc., and vigilantism maybe you can argue partially result of it. But state support for vigilantism is a new development. That is a marked departure from, and I've studied these things, so I can give you. We don't have time to go into details of this. State support of vigilantism puts vigilantism in a different category today, and it's not just about criminal justice system or slowness. Okay, let's go for the next round. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Let's take. Shall we turn to Zoom for a moment? Just one question. Yeah, since we promised, let's deliver the promise. Yeah.
So we have a question from Hitesh Hathi.
Yes. What is Hitesh asking? Yeah.
How do we reconcile what appears to be a contradiction? On the one hand, the BJP's politics involve keeping minorities out of the public realm, while on the other, apparently, when it comes to access to benefits of the state's programs, there appears to be no systematic prejudice, with Muslims able to take advantage of these programs, both in terms of election politics and ideology. Can those two facts continue to sit together? Or is it possible that we don't know enough about the operation of these benefit programs to say definitively whether they are fairly administered?
Terrific. Yamini, would you like, since you've studied benefits so much, the idea that electoral and political marginalization of minorities or Muslims in particular is going along with the inclusion in the benefits program?
It's bare minimum. Let's first start with the caveat that we don't know because we don't have good data. And this is all based on narrative. Certainly, though, in the CSTS exit poll data, it did seem that the sense of amongst Muslim population of receiving benefits was high at any rate. But it is important to remember that the political project of marginalization has been achieved outside of benefits. And these benefits are fairly bare minimal benefits. So a lot of what you hear about the Labharti phenomenon and the relationship with Modi gets very clearly articulated when you're talking with Hindu women across castes, at least in my limited experience. But the minute you start talking to Muslims, it's a very different story. So that polarization already exists. There's a certain limited amount of administrative benefit that the state has to give, which the state is willing to do because it doesn't need to do anything else. It's marginalizing the Muslim in everyday social and political life in any case.
The director of the Mittal Institute is here. So I would ask him two questions. Of course, I'd like him to make concluding remarks when he's ready, but it's about 8 o'clock. Shall we go on? Are we allowed to go on for another 5 to 10 minutes? Yes? Okay. Tarun says yes. So let's say the last set of questions. How many hands are up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's collect all 5. But briefly, yeah? Let's start with you.
I would share a small anecdote and a questions to Yamini. So regarding the empowerment of individual, so I can that's a fascinating explanation because I can see that in myself also. So I remember when I was in undergrad, so Smriti Irani, she was the HRD minister. She started a scholarship scheme for Northeastern students, and it was irrespective of all caste group, and even from upper caste they could apply. And then we were the beneficiary of the schemes, and it was very generous schemes. But after that, I know that a number of things that Smriti Irani did wrong as a HRD minister, but that personal attribution that we got benefited from the scheme, then I can move out to Assam and study my higher studies. That never I feel like that's that personal touch is always there. And when I speak to my friends, that attribution is always there, and always feel sympathetic to her and the government.
There's another question about benefits.
Yeah. So, but then so
their comment about it.
And the question that follows for me is that when I was looking at 2021, Rahul mentioned about Assam election also. One thing that I could observe around my village was that the way BJP, in a way, aligned the beneficiary with, just an example, that for certain schemes, if they has to be a beneficiary, internally this message was sent that you have to sign up for BJP membership, and like this flag needs to be hang in front of BJP houses, also your houses.
So, yes,
so
in the
is
interest
it-
of time,
is it-
we got the point. In the interest of time, don't mean to cut you off, but
I wanted to ask, is it a like nationwide phenomenon? Do you observe something in
it's a brilliant question. Is the provision of benefits linked to membership of the BJP? That's what it, whoever wishes to answer it, we'll, yes, sir, we go to you next.
Hello, everyone. My question is directed to Professor Vashni, but I guess even Rahul can answer that question.
Yeah.
This is more of a theoretical question. You can
Go ahead.
you can see an extension, if you will, of Hitesh's question. Like, what kind of departure from this regime can we expect? Because democracy seems to be coexisting with a great majoritarian turn, which is both violent and exclusionary, but democracy seems to be thriving. So what kind of a departure can we actually expecting from this regime? Thank you.
The question that was asked earlier, I would give a two-finger response more to it because it forced me to think a little
Okay.
more at some point.
You want to do it now or later?
Sure.
Yeah,
I
go
was
ahead.
just whispering.
So the benefits, provision of benefits and link to BJP membership, yeah.
Not the link to BJP membership, but this very critical question of the Labharti cuts across religion, although there's political polarization and
Yes, okay,
marginalization
okay.
in political life.
That's
And I-
Hitesh's question.
Yeah, and I wonder whether this has something to do with the need to, because the need to build legitimacy around the government's governance ability to deliver to beneficiaries is extremely central to the tools that are used for legitimization of the political project. So I wonder whether this is also part of building legitimacy in governance that creates a space then for legitimacy of political marginalization without consistent outrage of violence. It's just something to think about. You forced me to think this
Wonderful.
in a very important question.
Yes, let's think about it further. Wonderful. Great intervention, Yamini. Yes, last two questions from there. Three questions. Yeah, let's start with you.
Sir, it's question to you. I'm Saurav from CPS JNU.
Yeah.
In your recent article, electoral democracy versus constitutional democracy, like that is the old like argument of like how democracies die and sort of logic like in India, specifically talking about populism. So in dominant view, we see populism as some sort of deviation from democracy as such. But there are other scholars like Jeffrey Alexander or in our center, Professor Ajay Godavarti, they have that one type of argument like democracy is not that deviation from democracy, but populism is a part of democracy and it is like naturally occurring phenomena. So within this context, Indian populism, although is evolving as some sort of depicting as a anti-elitist or anti-institutional force, they are also creating some new institutions and they are also now emerging some new lights within this system as such. So how to look this populism? Like, is it
the relationship between populism and democracy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are two these dominant views. I'm just confused.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go. Yeah. Right behind you. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Namaste, everyone. I am thankful to Lakshmi Mittal and of course grateful to the distinguished speakers here. I am Kundan Kaushal, PhD research scholar at Department of Political Science, University of Delhi.
Yeah.
So what I could take note of the delivered lecture and presentations. So from that, I could perceive there is a change in notions of welfare nowadays, which Ashutosh sir and Yamini ma'am pointed towards. So for me, it was like rhetorics of welfare first, and second, it is freebies as a welfare paradigm. And that follows my questions in within. First, from the rhetorics of welfare, I asked to Yamini ma'am, the question is it like that out of despondency, the voters are more likely to submit against any of the multidimensional civic necessities like employment, education, law and order, food security, and many etc. and etc. But though of course they are not getting all of them covered under any of the deliverance or under any of the deliverance made by the governance in UP or whether in the larger perspective in India. So as ma'am pointed towards like Modi ka namak, and the belief of at least that deliverance will be provided to them is making some, is providing them some substitute or some option in the form of optimism to that despondency. And then second, for the freebies as a welfare paradigm, I asked to any of Asutosh sir or Yamini ma'am, these days Punjab after Delhi has upvoted for the freebies governance. So should not it be regarded or considered as a paradigm shift nowadays?
I see. Okay, let me reconstruct in the interest of time. So your question to Yamini is that in times of despondency, almost anything you can clutch
Exactly,
at
sir.
will improve your
Right.
understanding or your perception of government performance, right? So that's what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
And you're also asking whether freebies are in under AAP, let's say, or under BJP are very different. I think that's what the question.
Right, sir.
I'll let Yamini
Just
take
a
this
small question to Rahul sir.
Yeah,
also.
yeah. That last question there. Yeah.
Thank you. And my question is to Rahul. I want to take the discussion back to the Congress.
Yeah.
So fine, I understand, Rahul, that there are about 100 million odd electoral share that the Congress has, which you say has remained constant over the years. And if you see that the larger electorate being expanding, it is actually declining. Fine, but and I also understand that we live in a dominant party state where opposition parties will be either disseminated or ineffective. But the thing with the Congress party is that its 100 odd million vote share is spread out across the country. In your study of the party, sir, I mean, why do you think the party has reached to such a stage? What is so unique in the party's functioning or the structure that even with 100 million vote share spread out across the country, why is the party in such a bad state?
Yeah, so that's just to add to that, and maybe this is the last point here, and then we can, Rahul, Congress has 19% of India's vote. It had 18.7 in 2014, or let's say around 19 plus minus. The third largest party in India is not more than 3.2% of the vote. Aam Aadmi Party, being projected in some assessments, and perhaps you, maybe not, correct me, as cannibalizing Congress vote, etc. Aam Aadmi Party is basically at 2%, and less than that, right? And the gap between 2 and 19 or 3 and 19 is huge. So if cannibalization has to take place, it has to be a 2-year rapid, absolutely monstrous cannibalization for Congress to decline from 19% to 10% or something like that, right? So this is just to add to what he's saying. There is something about, this is also the Prashant Kishore point, right? For AAP or TMC to become a Congress party cannot be a 3-year affair. It is going to take a long time. So I'm combining all these questions. Let's start with you. Yeah.
I thought welfare questions.
Okay, go ahead. Then go ahead, whatever you wish to answer. Yeah, maybe we'll close in 5 minutes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, to the welfare thing, very quickly, I think the use of the word surakshit, which is a refrain we constantly, I heard a lot, really encompasses precisely your question that even in times of despondency, whatever there is available, whatever is being given is keeping us safe, was a very strongly ingrained, at least in what we heard. And also don't forget that the reform of the public distribution system coincided, because of the National Food Security Act, coincided with the 2017, the emergence of the Yogi government. So the ground was laid. And there was another question, which now I have forgotten.
Freebies under AAP.
Freebies have always been part of Indian politics, or whatever we claim is freebies. There's nothing new here. What is new is how the framing of freebies is being linked with the party state. One of the distinctions, and maybe even as Gilles pointed out, that's not necessarily as new because it's been done at state government level, but the scale at which it's being done and the tools that are being deployed is what makes it particularly unique, and its impact on the larger framing of citizenship. And one of the differences subtle but important differences between AAP's model and the BJP's model is that AAP is willing to talk about health and education, even though perhaps a voter may not vote for health and education and is voting for the other freebies, but that narrative of the Delhi model around health and education is part of the political legitimacy that AAP secured in Delhi, which it then took to Punjab and talked about.
You want to say?
No, no, you go ahead. I'll have to say something in the end.
So there are two questions. One, why is Congress failing to revive? That can't be answered in 2 minutes. It will be a 250-page book, but I can give you a short answer. Congress lives in its own myth. Congress created certain myths for itself, all parties do, but at some point, those myths basically start giving you diminishing returns. What happens when you start living under those myths, you fail to do proper SWOT analysis. You don't know what your threats are. You don't know what your opportunities are. You should be focusing on Uttarakhand, but you end up focusing on Uttar Pradesh, and you lost both. So basically that's what happens. Yes, Congress is still the second largest party with 19% vote share, and it would be foolish and naive of me to even think Congress would basically collapse in 2 years, especially a party that is twice as old as India's republic. But cannibalization has begun. You saw in Goa, you saw in what happened in Punjab. So I'm not at all saying that Congress will not be a party in 2024 or 2029. Basically, in politics, the perceived competition will divide the resources. So Congress will still most likely, even in its worst, they will win 40-45 seats, as we saw in 2014 and 2019. Even if Aam Aadmi Party sweeps Delhi, sweeps Punjab, wins something else and other places, will be 20 seats. But think about it. Now, if there are going to be 3 parties with 30 seats, even if BJP forms 250, the effective electoral distance between the first spot and the second spot will basically keep BJP buoyant nationally for the short term. And the final point, 19% in 2 elections. Tell me any state where Congress got below 20 and revived.
Well, yeah, it didn't.
So Congress does not know route to revival. At 19%, basically now its votes are up for grabs. What you might see in 2024 is basically
this statistical point, which has been made several times now and with considerable validity, that when Congress drops below 20%, it can't revive itself. Because the explanation is not clear why that is so. I think statistically it turns out to be right. But this statistical correlation has to be explained. What exactly is right? And as political scientists, we might want to do that. What is the explanation for this 20% threshold as being very critical?
The only law Ashutosh political scientists know is Duverger's law. There is no other law in political science.
No, there are other laws also, but anyway, there are no laws in political science, let's say.
But what happens when you go below that, the bipolarity develops and your vote starts splitting. So what you saw with BSP in UP, something similar will happen with Congress in states with below 20%. That Congress voters will no longer think that this is the party which can win, and they will basically switch their votes to whoever they think is winning or coming runner-up.
The strategic voters will do that. Yeah.
Also, if I may, so when the Congress drops at 20% and below, it's usually preceded by organizational erosion and collapse. And then after that, it has an accelerating effect. And so it is an organizational question also. I'm not sure it's just a question of stats and distribution of votes, but it's the ability to mobilize. And what we've seen in the Northeast, for example, in several states in the Northeast, is that the Congress went from 35% of the votes to 2%, 3% very rapidly. And I'm not saying that it.
Let's say, no. Let's be clear about this. 2.5% in 2022 and 30% was probably 1987, 89. No, it took, we can double check the numbers. It took about 30 years. Yeah. 2.5% is spectacularly low.
Yeah,
spectacularly low within UP.
He's talking about Northeast.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about Northeast specifically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, specifically in the Northeast.
Yeah.
Tripura, Manipur, this election.
Yeah.
They were ruling 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I think, So Tarun, would you like to make some concluding remarks as our director?
I can make them from here. Sorry, we're running over time. And first of all, thank you to the panelists for coming together. And to the audience, I think it's really lovely to see so many young scholars, so many people preface their comments by saying, I'm a PhD student in this place and that place, and it was music to my ears. It's very nice. Thank you so much. Thanks to the gentleman who is on the screen, Sanjay. I really appreciate it. I'm not a political scientist, but I was just struck by one or two small points. Maybe a view from outside the profession is sometimes helpful. So many people alluded to the absence of data in so many different contexts. And as a person trained primarily as a mathematician and as a data person, I would throw a challenge back to all the political scientists to say that if you really do want to answer all these questions, maybe we need to embrace some broader notions of collecting data and so on, many of which are eminently amenable to analysis. Why wait for the electoral rolls to come out? Of course, those data are valuable, but they're surely not the only data that can inform us about why, for instance, Yamini and I are on a health commission together, and I'm still puzzling about why in heaven's name health is not an electoral issue. I just can't get my heads around that, given in my adopted home in the United States, what a salient issue that is. That's just an example, but I would just end with that observation on the data, saying that there's plenty of room for methodological advancement, and hopefully that would also lead to research process.
Will fund the data.
Yes, we will fund it.
The economy of independent research in India is a matter of another.
But thank you very much for taking the time to do this and for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.